My name is Michael Turner. I'm 38 years old, living in Dallas, Texas, and for the last decade, I've been working in sales. I'm not flashy. I'm not the kind of guy who walks into a room and makes everyone stare. But I always believed in building something stable, in building a future. Apparently, that wasn't enough for my wife. I'll never forget the night it happened. We were at a small dinner with her friends. Someone brought up engagements, jewelry, and the kind of rings their husbands had bought. My wife turned to me, smirked, and with a cruel little laugh said, "Michael can't even afford a proper ring. I guess I just have to settle." Her words cut through me like a knife. Everyone laughed along. I forced a smile, but inside I was dying. She didn't know. She had no clue. Because while she was mocking me in front of her friends, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A message had come through from a client I'd been negotiating with for months. That deal was worth far more than any diamond on her finger. $9,400,000. But she didn't know. Not yet. In that moment, while she laughed at me, I sat there quietly, looking around the table, memorizing every smirk on their faces. I wanted to speak up, to shout, to defend myself, but I didn't. I swallowed the pain, kept calm, and let her laugh echo in my ears, because I knew something she didn't. In 2 weeks, everything would change. When I first met Sarah, things were different. She wasn't the woman who would laugh at me in front of her friends. Back then, she was sweet, supportive, and I believe she loved me for who I was. We met in college at a local coffee shop where I worked part-time to pay my tuition. She was studying psychology, always surrounded by friends, always the center of attention. I was the quiet guy, the one who stayed late to mop the floors and count tips that barely covered my books. But for some reason, she noticed me. We started dating, and I'll admit, it felt like I had won the lottery. She was beautiful, confident, and ambitious. And me? I was just a guy with big dreams and an even bigger determination to make something out of nothing. In the early days of our marriage, things were good. We didn't have much, but we had each other. We'd eat ramen noodles at night, laugh about the future, and promise that one day things would get better. She used to say, "Michael, I don't care if we're broke. As long as I have you, I'm happy." I believed her. So I worked. I worked harder than I ever thought possible. Long hours at the office, side hustles at night, saving every dollar I could. Slowly, we upgraded our lives, a better apartment, a decent car, small vacations. Nothing extravagant, but it was progress. Still, there were signs I ignored. Sarah loved being around people with money. Whenever we went out with her friends, she would drop little comments about their husbands' jobs, their expensive cars, or the size of their homes. I brushed it off, telling myself it was harmless, that she was just dreaming big. But over time, her comments grew sharper. When I bought her a modest necklace for our 3rd anniversary, she smiled, but later I overheard her telling her sister it looked cheap. When we attended a wedding, she whispered, "Look at her ring, Michael. Maybe one day you'll be able to afford something like that." Each comment chipped away at me. I kept working, kept pushing, thinking if I just earned more, she'd stop comparing me. But the truth is, money never fixes a lack of gratitude. Still, I clung to the life we were building. I thought the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the endless grind. I thought it all meant something. I wanted her to see me as a provider, a partner, a man worthy of respect. Instead, I became her punchline. The woman who once promised she'd be happy with nothing had turned into someone who measured my worth by the numbers in our bank account. And while she was drifting away emotionally, I was quietly climbing in my career. I had started making connections, learning how big contracts were structured and positioning myself for opportunities far beyond my salary. But I never told her. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was fear. I wanted her to see me, not my paycheck. I wanted her to love me for the man I was, not the money I could make. The cruelest part? For a while, I thought she still did. Until the night she laughed at me, mocked me in front of her friends like I was nothing. That was the moment everything we had built in the past felt like a lie, and it set the stage for what was coming next. After that dinner with Sarah's friends, I couldn't shake the sound of her laugh out of my head. The way she mocked me, the way everyone else joined in. It was like a wound that refused to heal. But instead of exploding, I went silent. I realized something in that moment. When people show you who they are, believe them. And Sarah had shown me exactly what I had become in her eyes. Not a husband, not a partner, but a failure. From then on, I started noticing things I had ignored before. Her phone was suddenly always on silent. She started leaving the room to answer calls. She spent more nights out with her friends, but when I asked who, the names never matched the stories. She began dressing differently too, not for me, not for us, but for the eyes of people outside our home. And every time money came up, she used it as a weapon. When I suggested cutting back on expenses, she sneered. Maybe if you earned as much as Amanda's husband, we wouldn't need to cut back. When I told her about saving for the future, she rolled her eyes. Michael, you can't even afford the present. Don't talk to me about the future. Each jab was like a hammer, pounding away at the foundation of what little marriage we had left. But I didn't fight back. I didn't argue. I watched, because while she was so busy ridiculing me, she didn't realize that something much bigger was happening quietly, behind the scenes. I had been in touch with an international client for months. We were negotiating a contract that could change my entire career, a deal worth $9.4 million. At work, I poured every ounce of energy into it. At home, I played the fool. She thought I was weak. She thought I was blind. But I was sharper than I had ever been. I remember one night vividly. It was 2:07 a.m. I woke up to the glow of her phone, lighting up the room. She didn't know I was awake. I turned slightly and saw her texting furiously, a smile on her face. The same smile she hadn't given me in months. She put her phone down and fell asleep with her back to me. I stared at the ceiling, wide awake, my heart pounding. I didn't need to check her phone. I didn't need to ask questions. The truth was already written in her behavior. That night, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt clarity, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to beg her to love me. I wasn't going to prove my worth to someone who had already decided I was worthless. Instead, I was going to finish what I had started. The deal was close to closing. The client trusted me, not my company, not my boss. Me. So I doubled down. Every late night, every early morning, every email. I gave it everything I had. Not for Sarah, not for my boss, not for anyone else. For me. And as the days passed, I could feel the tension in our house growing heavier. She grew colder, sharper. I grew quieter, calmer. She didn't realize that silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. It happened on a Saturday evening. Sarah and I had been invited to her cousin's birthday dinner. I didn't want to go. I knew what it would be. Another chance for her to parade me around like some underachiever she was forced to tolerate. But refusing would only fuel her temper. So I went. The restaurant was loud, crowded, full of polished smiles and champagne glasses clinking together. Her cousin's husband bragged about his new Mercedes. Another guest showed off photos from a luxury vacation in Greece. I stayed quiet, sipping water, content to let others talk. Then it happened. Out of nowhere, Sarah laughed and said, "Well, Michael doesn't have those problems. He can't even afford a decent ring, let alone a vacation. But hey, at least he's good at being boring." The table erupted in laughter. My face burned. I felt every eye on me, and in that moment, something inside me broke. Not the way she expected. I didn't yell. I didn't storm out. I didn't fight back. I simply looked at her, really looked at her, and realized I didn't recognize this woman anymore. The girl I had married. The one who swore love mattered more than money. She was gone. I smiled politely at the table, nodded and stayed silent. But inside, my mind clicked into place, like a lock turning. That night when we got home, she fell asleep almost instantly, still smirking at the little scene she had created. But me, I didn't sleep a minute. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and stared at the email draft from my client. The deal was sitting there, waiting. All it needed was my final confirmation. I thought about her laugh. I thought about the humiliation. And I thought about how in just 2 weeks, this deal could change everything. For years, I had been working to prove myself to her, to show her I was enough. But that night, I realized something powerful. I didn't need her approval. I didn't need her validation. I didn't even need her presence in my life. I needed freedom. So I clicked send. The deal was officially in motion. And as the whoosh of the email echoed in the quiet of the room, I whispered to myself, "I won't cry for you. I'll build without you." That was the moment I knew. The end of us and the beginning of me. After I hit send on that email, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't joy, not yet. It was calm. For the first time in years, I wasn't scrambling for Sarah's approval or begging her for respect. I was focused. The deal was moving forward. Meetings were scheduled, documents were drafted, and my client, a tech company expanding into the US, was eager to finalize. Every morning I woke up before dawn, poured coffee, and slipped into my home office while Sarah still slept. She thought I was wasting time on side projects. She had no idea I was orchestrating the biggest move of my life. I started making copies of everything: contracts, bank transfers, email threads. Not because I didn't trust the client, but because I knew I couldn't afford a single misstep. If Sarah caught wind of what was happening, she'd find a way to sabotage it. Or worse, try to claim it as hers. At home, I played the fool. When she rolled her eyes at me, I smiled faintly. When she compared me to her friends' husbands, I nodded silently. And when she spent hours on her phone, sneaking out for girls' nights, I didn't question it. My silence wasn't weakness, it was cover. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, I built. I quietly opened a new business account under my own LLC, something she didn't know existed. I worked with a lawyer to review contracts, making sure everything tied back to me personally, not the company I was leaving behind. Each night, as she drifted off in front of the TV, I double-checked my files, my emails, my plan. The funny thing, she thought she was the one getting away with the secrets. She thought I was too blind, too naive to notice the late-night texts, the sudden weekend conferences, the way she'd hide her credit card statements. But the truth? I saw it all. I let her think she was winning, because I was waiting for the right moment. One evening, she came home carrying shopping bags, shoes, jewelry, dresses, all charged on our joint credit card. She dropped them on the bed and said casually, "Don't worry, Michael. One day maybe you'll actually be able to afford this stuff for me." I didn't respond. I just watched her twirl in front of the mirror, posing in a dress I hadn't paid for. Not really, because soon none of it would matter. By then, the deal was almost ready to close. My lawyer had reviewed the final documents. The client was flying into town to sign in person. I rehearsed what I would say. I pictured Sarah's face when she realized the man she called broke was about to wire millions into his account. But this wasn't about revenge alone. It was about liberation. I started packing small things quietly: documents, keepsakes, personal items. Not enough for her to notice, but enough that when the time came, I could walk away without looking back. She thought my silence meant defeat, but every calm smile, every nod, every "sure, honey" was part of my strategy. I was letting her dig the hole deeper, all while I was climbing out of mine. And on the night before the signing, as she prepared for yet another girls' trip, she mocked me one last time. "Don't wait up, Michael. Maybe you should spend the weekend working on finally becoming a man." I simply replied, "Don't worry. I already am." She laughed, tossing her hair, and walked out the door. But if she had looked closely, she would have seen the briefcase by my desk, filled with contracts worth $9,400,000. She would have seen the calm in my eyes. She would have realized the war she thought she was winning had already been lost. The morning of the signing felt unreal. I ironed my shirt, knotted my tie, and slipped the briefcase into my car. Sarah barely noticed me leaving. She was too busy packing for her so-called girls' trip, humming to herself as if she didn't have a care in the world. By 10 a.m., I was sitting in a sleek glass office downtown. The client's executives filed in, handshakes firm, eyes focused. The documents were laid on the table, pristine and heavy with consequence. My lawyer sat beside me, nodding. When the pen hit paper, the room seemed to hold its breath. And then it was done. My name, my company, my signature. The contract was mine, and with it, $9,400,000 in revenue wired directly to my account. In that instant, the weight of years of humiliation fell off my shoulders. Sarah's laughter, the insults, the nights I stayed awake wondering if I'd ever be enough, gone. I didn't celebrate. I didn't shout. I simply closed the briefcase, shook hands, and walked out with a calm smile. Because my celebration was waiting at home. That evening, Sarah rolled her suitcase through the door, chattering about poolside cocktails and fun with the girls. She barely glanced at me. To her, I was still the broke husband she could mock at will, until I slid the envelope across the table. "What's this?" she asked, frowning. "Read it," I said quietly. She tore it open and froze. Divorce papers, a detailed financial statement, and attached a copy of the freshly signed $9.4 million deal. Her face drained of color. This isn't real." "It's very real," I said, my voice steady. "And it's mine. Not yours. Not ours." "Mine," she stammered, trying to find words, her eyes darting between the papers and me. You can't just..." "I already did." For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel humiliated. I felt free. She sank into a chair, silent, her hands trembling. The same woman who had mocked me in front of friends, who had sneered at my efforts, who had laughed at me for not affording a ring, now sat speechless, staring at the proof of what I had become without her. I gathered my packed bag, the one I had been preparing quietly for weeks, and walked to the door. "You thought I was broke," I said, pausing one last time. "But the truth is, I was just waiting. And now, I don't owe you anything," and with that, I left. The silence behind me was louder than any laughter she had ever thrown my way. It's been 2 years since that night I walked out with nothing but a packed bag and my freedom. When I look back now, I don't see failure anymore. I don't see the broke man she mocked. I see a survivor, a man who refused to stay broken. The $9,400,000 deal wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming my worth, about proving not to her, but to myself, that I was capable of more than she ever believed. With that money, I built something new, a company that thrives because I no longer work to please anyone but myself. A quiet home, far from the chaos, where peace is the loudest sound. People often ask me if I regret marrying Sarah. The truth? Number. Without her betrayal, I might never have found this strength. Without her laughter, I might never have had the fire to rise. She took everything she could, my confidence, my dignity, my trust. But she couldn't take my soul. And from that, I rebuilt everything. So if there's one lesson I carry, it's this. Sometimes the greatest revenge is in anger, or shouting, or proving someone wrong in the moment. It's living a life so whole, so successful, so peaceful, that their memory becomes nothing more than background noise. She laughed at me for not affording a ring. Now, every time I look at the life I've built, I smile, not out of bitterness, but out of gratitude. Because in losing her, I found myself. And this time, I'll never let go.